This is the Faroe Islands, a place that's been described as a landscape photographer's playground. Everyone expects images like these from this place, but what if I told you my favourite images weren't really of any of these things? This is a video about a trip that saw me gather 18 months worth of changing thoughts about creativity and photography. It's about what my photos are now and what they represent, and everything I've learned from all that and how you can apply it to your own photographic journey. Essentially, it's about how the photographs connect with you. If you're wondering at this point, what on earth's wrong with your eye? Stick around till the end, I'll explain what happened. So I went to the Faroe Islands a few weeks ago, and I went with Nigel Danson. I was making a few videos for him, I was making this video, and we were also joined by Nigel's brother-in-law, Neil, who's also a photographer. And everything you see here is a culmination of 4 days exploring the islands with my two cameras. The Fujifilm X100VI, which is my everyday camera, and my Sony A7R5, which is more of my pro camera, I suppose, that I use for video stuff and whatever else. After we arrived in the Faroe Islands, our first trip out was for sunset at the incredible floating lake. On a trip like this, I think it's easy to think that the first few images you take are going to be representative of what you get on a trip, and it's really easy to therefore pile a load of pressure on ourselves to start taking great images almost straight away. What I like to do at the start of a trip is think of my first few images as almost warm-up shots. Like, you won't go out for a run without warming up, certainly not at my age anyway, because you will injure yourself, as I continue to do. So without these warm-up shots, I don't think we can get into that photographic creative zone that we need to be in to make the most of these expeditions. I say expeditions, it's just driving and the odd hike. Yeah, we put a lot of time and expense into them, so there almost is a pressure that we put on ourselves to go back with something amazing. So I had very little expectancy from the first day. I kind of saw that as my warm-up zone for what was then going to follow over the next few days. And there were probably photos to be had at the floating lake, but I just wasn't quite feeling it for whatever reason. We hiked out on a trail up to Serendipitous, which are the cliffs near Midvega, which is where we stayed in the Faroe Islands. And it's basically known for this floating lake above these enormous cliffs, which are, I think, about 140 meters tall. Honestly, they felt bigger than that. They're so imposing and you feel so small and insignificant when you're stood on the top of them. I suppose when you're on top of anything over the 10 meters tall, it's probably enough to kill you if you fell off. But the higher these things get, the scarier it for some reason is. And it's really hard to get across in the images just how big these things are. The light wasn't great in the first afternoon. I was trying to capture it in the best way possible. But other than being in this video, I'm not really sure these images are going to get shown all that much ever again. I've just not got a massive connection to them, and I don't think the light's great. I've seen much better images of these cliffs from other photographers. I think my favourite shots were looking back towards the lake, across to this little hut, and there was just a nice kind of glow in the sky. I just like how it was framed on this shoreline here. Like I say, it's always hard to start. I mentioned the cameras already, but I should probably say that the photos I'm showing are a mixture of straight out of camera Fujifilm JPEGs. These are shot on some custom recipes that I have said I'll make a video on at some point, more on that later. Some of them are shot on Fujifilm RAW files, and I've applied my own edits to them, and the rest of them are Sony RAW files, again with my own edits to them. All of the JPEG Fujifilm ones haven't really had anything else done to them. They are literally the JPEGs the cameras spit off. And that was it for day one, really. And by the time we got back to the house and unpacked, it was about 5 hours before our alarms were due to go off at 3:30 the next morning. Thankfully, I was able to doze for much of the 1 hour, 20-minute drive. Nothing in the Faroes seems close to anything else. I've got no idea where the place is that we went to. I think it was near a village called Funninga. Not even close. Anyway, I was very tired and it was windy as fuck. This was a really difficult morning, one of the most difficult I reckon I've had. The wind was insane. Even with a fully laden backpack, I could lean into it and it would support my weight. And we were filming a video And like I said, I was tired. It was just very difficult. We didn't think we were going to get any light either, but it was a spectacular place to take photos. We got these awesome views down the fjords, the mountains on the other side, and thankfully the clouds did start to change colour a bit. I quite like this first shot, and I'm sure it's not perfect. It was really hard to keep a camera steady, but it's a shot that feels representative of that moment to me. This shot of the fence, I'm just not sure about it. The fence doesn't look like it fits. I think it's this front post of it that I've got a bit of an issue with. We were pretty much done and ready to go in because of how wind blasted we were, but then the light did start to break through, and I got a few shots that I quite like. I quite like this shot of the road, although it feels a bit far away. I prefer to be closer to subjects when I'm photographing them. I feel like it doesn't really represent what I'm trying to do with my photography at the moment. I think when you're in these kind of places, it's very easy to get into the zone of point your camera at anything and everything and press the shutter button, and that was something I was trying to move away from on this trip. This place was really good for taking pictures of lone subjects on the rocks, but that very much depended on whether or not you were able to stand still on them. The wind was that strong. Like I said, it's easy to point your camera at anything and try and make it work as a picture, and sometimes I like to take the opportunities to try different things out. So I went for a more, dare I say it, cinematic style edit on these letterbox shots. I'm not sure if I mentioned whether or not I was tired, but I was tired. I was really struggling on this day. I'd had 2 early mornings in a row because I had to get up early for the flight, the previous one, and I really struggle when I don't sleep enough. About 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with an illness called hyperthyroidism, and it's basically where the thyroid gland in your neck doesn't make enough hormones. And one of the main symptoms of that is fatigue. And I'm on medication for it now, and the medication is pretty well managed, and most of the time I'm fine. But if I don't sleep properly, I am a mess. It takes me literally days to recover. So 3:30 a.m. sunrises aren't my favourite thing in the world. Anyway, after this brutal hike up and down this mountain, it was time to get back in a Qashqai, or in my case, in the back of the Qashqai, where I think I spent about 16 hours over the next few days. Obviously that meant for a lot of driving, but it also meant that we came across some really interesting things on our drives. This is looking down onto the village of Funninga, and as we passed it, this beautiful light was just streaming down into the valley. It wasn't long after that I came across my first bus stop, and regular viewers will know how much I like a bus stop. This one wasn't easy to photograph, as might be obvious by my terrible photograph of it. It's too many buildings, too much going on, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but I was pretty tired. The next one though was spectacular. This one I really like. I just love the simplicity of it and the glow of the light and how it separated from the background. This one will certainly be going into my ever-expanding collection of bus stop photos. We also stopped at this famous twisting road that I'm sure you've seen before. I've got no idea what it's called. And this shot I think is a wide-angle pano, but for me it's just too wide. It just doesn't represent what I saw. And I've spoken about this before, how I'm less of a fan these days of taking my photos with a wide-angle lens because I don't think it connects with my vision and my memory of a place. I much prefer the image I shot at 35mm, which also is slightly cropped in, but again, I don't think it's a great image necessarily. I just wanted to use it to show an example of where my thinking goes when it comes to this kind of thing. I think it's just lacking something. It's not got a proper subject to it. Finally, it was time to go back for that well-earned nap and my multi-day use of the death stairs up to my bed. When I awoke from my pleasant 2-hour slumber, the light pouring into the back of the house was beautiful. I love how it interacts with the shadows and the lines and everything else, so I just really like this photo, hence why I took it. And thankfully it lasted until Nigel and I walked out to get a hot dog. As ever, I took my everyday camera, my Fujifilm, with me because you never know what you're going to see. And this is a perfect example of when you might need it. This was just opposite our house. It's quite nice. It's not really of anything. It's a building, obviously. There's nothing necessarily interesting about it. I just quite like the light in it. This next one for me is just perfect. Just a toilet on a street. That's it. What more could you want? Nothing else to say about it. The next one though, maybe one of my favourites ever. This was in my video last week and I love this photo more every time I look at it. Firstly, the bus stop. I love bus stops. That's initially what drew me in. And then I noticed this little red bike left by this open door that sort of perfectly framed it. And I think that tells such a strong story. And then it's next to this red house with the flaking paint that then takes you to the red house in the background and how that contrasts with it, because that house looks in better condition. And then the more you look at it, the more little details you see, like the green bench and the rusting barrels and the upturned bucket, and everything about this image is just perfect to me. And it's not often that happens. I absolutely love it. I also really like this house with the graffiti and the pink bench and the rock out to sea in the distance, and the kind of juxtaposition of those two things. And if I hadn't have taken my camera on this walk to get a hot dog, I wouldn't have got these last 3 images. And you can't say, oh, I'll go back and do it later either, because where we got the hot dog was 2 minutes from our house. So we walked there, I took these pictures, we got the hot dog. We came back less than 5 minutes later, and the bike was gone. That photo can never be taken again. Always have your camera with you. Anyway, that afternoon, more driving, more Qashqai. We drove to a village called Saxon, which is famous for these huts and grass growing on the roofs of them. I tried to capture them with this sheep in the shot, but there was just too much clutter over to the left-hand side, which is far too distracting. So I managed to reframe the shot and took it with the houses and this view here, which is okay. The light is not ideal, it's kind of harsh, direct. But as I was taking it, these 2 geese walked into the shot, which completely transformed it. Just makes something a bit more unique. So this is probably my favourite image of those. I tried to use that same concept photographing this church, and I really like how you got these 5 sort of evenly spaced sheep in the foreground and 1 in the background. And I really like the composition of this, but it's just all too much the same colour and it just doesn't quite work. And I think because I'm shooting into the sun as well, it doesn't quite work for me. I much prefer side light. Side light as shown in this photo, which is probably my favourite from that afternoon. I don't know, I can't explain it. There's just something, the way it's just sat there in this amazing landscape with this beautiful light hitting it, that just makes it. This is just the kind of stuff I really like. And then there's the challenge of just composing it so that it fits with everything else that's going on around it, which is often done quite purposefully. There's this waterfall in the background and you can just about see a little bit of it through the windscreen of the digger, and then how the rest of it comes out in this space in the gap between the digger and the digger arm. It's this kind of stuff that I really like to try and do in my images. Obviously we had a bit of a drive back then, and I tried to get a few more images in a similar style on that drive. I particularly like this one of the yellow hut seemingly in the middle of nowhere with this view over the sea and beyond. I just really love the simplicity of this and the lighting on it as well. It's just a perfect shot to me again, and the colour of it really makes it too. And I think that really shows how my photography's evolved, not just recently, but probably more over the last decade. I was having a chat with a friend about this the other night and about what my photography used to be. Anything I got to do in my spare time was always traditional-ish landscapes. And I think they often came across quite dark and stark and isolating maybe. I always used to want to put these pictures I'd taken up in my house, but my wife, she wasn't so keen. And I can see why. They definitely invoked a certain kind of mood. When I think about it, I think photography often represents who we are and where we're at in terms of like mentally and mindset and everything else. Subconsciously or not, all the stuff going on in here transfers into our creative work, whether that be into our filmmaking or in this case into our images. I have mentioned this before, but I had a really kind of difficult time earlier in my life, and it took me a long time to deal with it. In short, to stop people guessing. My dad passed away when I was only 14 and my mum when I was 24, so I lost my parents at a pretty early age. But that understandably affected me mentally, substantially, and I never really dealt with it. I didn't deal with it because I didn't know how to deal with it. And I think that's completely represented in how I used to approach photography. It was an escape from those thoughts, but those thoughts were ultimately transferred into whatever it was I was pointing my camera at. I think it's a sort of mirror to where your brain's at. It was dark, it was stormy, it was lonely. There was no human presence to it, and that suggested the fact that I just wanted to be on my own to try and deal with all this. which by the way doesn't work. But with all the work I've done over the last few years, I've shifted now into this place where I'm looking for brightness and colour and joy, and it's so refreshing. Someone left a comment in my video last week about how images can link to what's going on in us. Now, I probably will come back and talk about this a little bit more later, but I think noticing it in our own photography is actually a really cool thing to do, and we can look at our own photography and see not just the journey we've gone on as a photographer in changes of style and improving and everything else, but also the journey we've gone on as people as well. That's one of my favorite things about photography. It's not just a representation of our lives and where we've been in our lives, but also what's going on in our lives as well. I think that's difficult to portray in anything other than some sort of visual creative media. Anyway, there was absolutely no sunset that night, so we got to have an early-ish night before we got up to catch the boat to Kalsoy early on day 3. Some of you are probably familiar with Kalsoy and its famous lighthouse and cliffs from a photographic point of view, and other people might recognise it but aren't really sure where from. James Bond's the answer. I'll explain in a sec. So to get to Kalsoy, you've got to get a ferry that fits about 7 cars on it, and then when you get across there, there's one road up and down the island. So you've got to drive down this road for 30-40 minutes, and then when you get to the end of it, you park your car and you start on the walk out to the lighthouse, which is another 30 minutes. But before you do that, you get to a Thai restaurant. If anyone can tell me a more remote Thai restaurant in the world, I'm all ears. Put it in the comments below, because this is the last place I think you'd expect a Thai restaurant. But anyway, in passing the Thai restaurant, someone comes to the door and charges each of you the equivalent of 20 euros to go on this walk. Now, this seems to be a fairly standard thing in the Faroe Islands. We also got charged 20 euros for each of us to go on the walk to the cliffs on day 1 as well. So if you are travelling to the Faroes and looking to go to these places, just be mindful of that. So, James Bond, specifically the last James Bond film, No Time to Die. And, spoiler alert, if you've not seen it, at the end of the film, which is filmed at Kalsoy, James Bond dies. Yeah, I know, it's pretty sad. Interestingly, Daniel Craig, who plays James Bond, has never set foot in this area. It was all filmed and then he apparently was put on it using visual effects. So he's never actually been there. And also, much to my disappointment, there was no destroyed nuclear base there either. But it is still an absolutely mind-blowing place. This cliff is 1/2 kilometre tall. That's over 3 times bigger than the tall ones we were stood on day 1. I think the point where we were standing at the lighthouse is like 200 meters up, but this one in front of us that was just ridiculously imposing and quite hard to get a photo of was just... This was a place that just felt like you needed to stop and take it in. And also a place where a photo can't really do it justice. To get it all in, or to get this much in, you had to shoot wide. But even with a wide angle lens, like I say, you cannot capture how incredible this place is. There's a classic telephoto shot that I took. This is of Nigel, and again, this isn't really me, but I thought I'd show it because you can see some sea stacks in it, and we'll probably come back to them in a bit because that's not the only time they feature. I've seen so many shots of these lighthouse and cliffs, and I think that's part of the problem when you come somewhere like this. You can't ever expect to get a photo as good as the ones you've seen online, because the ones you've seen online are the best images from the best photographers in the world taken at the best times, and you're just turning up on one particular day when you have no control over anything, weather-wise, conditions-wise, light-wise, access-wise, anything like that. I think what we see online sets us up so much for disappointment, and that can often impact how we feel about these trips and our images from them. I've just learned over the years to keep my expectations low. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm not connected to these types of images as much anymore. Obviously, this view is amazing, but the main draw for me in Kalsoy was to pay my respects. Once I gathered myself, we were driving back down Kalsoy, and that's when I started to see the things again that really interest me. Things like these houses that make you wonder what it's like to live there and live their lives. Things left by the side of the road that show signs of a life lived by a child that you can't really relate to, but also kind of can. I'm not really set on this shot of the church. I'm not sure it quite fits together properly, but something that does fit together properly is this shot. You could look at it and say, wow, that is cluttered. But I think one of the things I really like doing that I touched on before is trying to arrange things in a way that just fits together nicely. It's like piecing together a puzzle and for some reason it just works. As we drove back from Calsoy, we came across this, which is probably my favourite bus stop of the trip. I really like both of these shots, and I think the main reason for that is because the lights inside the bus stop are on. This is actually the same bus stop shot twice, just edited in very different ways, and I really like both edits and how they are so different from each other. I also really like both views behind, so this is a rare twofer from a bus stop. We then drove onto this famous waterfall at Gasalador, and it's when I was here that I realised that I can't be going around shooting things like this at 35mm. It just doesn't fit. This is shot at 24mm, which I don't really like to go down to. I quite like this though, and the sun tried to make an appearance, but this is about the best we got. We did come back here the next day though, which is coming up soon, and it was so much better. You can see in the shot there's a little village above the waterfall, and the way this village was accessed was through a tunnel built in 2004. The story goes that people used to visit the church down the road every Sunday, but there was no tunnel, so they had to cross over the mountain, and you can actually see the mountain path on Google Maps. It was either that or get a boat. Anyway, this tunnel was built in 2004 for not only that reason, apparently, but also to house this caravan. I'm sure it's just as the Lord intended. As I've been doing more and more from these trips, I've taken all the images from this video and I've turned them into a digital zine, my third in the series, called Adventure Frames. This is just a PDF with all the images I've taken on this trip, and I hope you can use it to inspire photographic adventures that you might have in the future. It's a great way to support what I do and support this channel, and there's a link to Adventure Frames in the description below. I said earlier this trip helped me condense my thoughts about being a photographer at the moment. The best photographers, and I'm not including myself in that by any way, shape or form, by the way. There's an element of wanting to be the best photographer I can be. But the best photographers and the most well-known photographers in the world are known because of the way they see the world and how they interpret that through their camera. It's not about capturing the best possible parts of the world in the best way that they can. And I think up until recently, that's what I've been trying to do. But everything I'm doing now is leaning towards capturing the world in the way that I see it. And that's where you kind of find a bit more uniqueness. But you need to be really present in all the moments of it to be able to do that. This is where I find myself, and presence has been something I've been enjoying a lot more of over the last year or so when I've got a camera with me. Being present allows you to experience. You experience the little moments like the bike left by the door and the scooter left by the road. You don't get that presence when you're just rushing from one epic location to another. I found that the moments in between, and my favourite images from this trip, the ones I've shown you and the ones I'm still going to show you, matter so much more to me than the ones that I thought I was going to the Faroe Islands for. Those moments in between are my photographic happy place right now, like I'm just experiencing one giant moment in between. I took these thoughts into day 4, which was more driving, more exploring, more Qashqai. There was mixed weather at the start of the day, which meant for a lot of rainbows, which, whilst beautiful, were difficult to photograph unless you had a subject. You need a subject to be able to photograph them well. The rainbow cannot be a subject, and as they appear when you're driving quite a lot of the time, it's whatever you have near you that you're able to shoot. Thankfully, as we went on, we got to these huts just as the weather changed, and I managed to get this small series of shots with rainbow coming across and this town in the background that I really like. Got another rainbow shot looking down at these sea stacks. They are the same sea stacks from before. They will appear again. And these sheep in the foreground. We then went down to this place, which was pretty cool, but not great light for landscapes. What it was better for though, was this AstroTurf football pitch behind us, which had kind of become a caravan site. The caravans did appear occupied, so I didn't feel like photographing them and being attacked for doing so. So I settled on this picnic bench in the centre circle and the view beyond. I really liked this shot, and although I was getting strange looks from a lady by the clubhouse for the football pitch, when you're taking pictures of bikes and scooters and bus stops, you are going to get some strange looks. Thankfully now I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, and I honestly couldn't give less of a shit. Just wanted to quickly mention as well, if you want to get any more of my photographic ramblings, there's a video interview I did with Justine when I was in London with her a few weeks ago that she has just put on her channel. So if that is linked in the description below, so check that out. Back to the Faroes. We drove on to a little town called Tornavik, which is home to the one and only surf shop in the Faroe Islands. I mean, there might be another one, but it's the only one I saw. This is an amazing, colourful little town with an incredible view out to sea, and The sea stacks. It seemed like everything interesting that I found in this town also had a view of the sea stacks, so I tried to frame them together in a single shot, as you'll see over the next few images. Most of them are fairly random shit, but I really like the juxtaposition of the random shit with the views of the cliffs and the sea stacks behind them. I think the one of the sign is probably my favourite. This one, for whatever reason, I'm not as taken with, and I've been trying to work out why. Why do I like this shot, but I don't like this shot? All of the ones I like intrigue or excite me in some way. The sheep don't excite me, just for reference. This one, there's nothing that does that. There's no arrangement of things I like. Whereas this one, you've got the old truck in it. This one, the upturned wheelbarrow. And I think that's the difference. It's something that's really hard to put your finger on. It's just like a feeling you get when you're taking the photograph. Maybe it's something that can't quite be explained. There were some other cool shots in this town as well, colours and textures that drew my eye, and I really enjoyed the hour or so we had to shoot in this little place. No surf though, unfortunately. The waves just weren't compliant. I would have done otherwise, obviously. Unfortunately as well, no new bus stops on the drive back. When you're on a trip like this with other people, it is difficult to yell stop every few minutes when you see some random thing you want to take a photograph of at the side of the road. You're in the car for long enough anyway, you don't want to be the one that extends that length of time. But we did photograph this hut on the way back, which I quite like, but probably would have preferred it with a bit of side light on it. We went back to the house and had a bit of a walk around and explore of the town that afternoon, but given the flat light, the tiredness, everything else, it just wasn't quite happening, and I didn't really find anything I liked all that much. There was probably an element of me being lazy about composition and stuff like that, but I think when the conditions are like that and you're in that sort of place mentally, it's very hard, especially when you're in the midst of a trip where you're being creative all the time, to kind of pull yourself out of it. So on to our last evening, and we headed back to Gasador and this incredible sunset. I am fully aware I've pronounced that two different ways. One of them might be right, neither might be right. Anyway, it's the waterfall. This is the kind of scene that when you're shooting with the Fujifilm in-camera recipes, they really don't work. As I've said, I'm going to make a video on the Fujifilm recipes, and I was supposed to do that yesterday. I was going to go out yesterday morning and film that, but I felt unwell because the night before this happened. Some people have asked if I got hit by Nigel's drone. No, this was entirely self-inflicted. I cannot play the guitar. This is relevant, I promise. I cannot play the guitar, but my son is learning, and he has been learning an electric guitar. So I took this electric guitar and I was just playing it, trying to do something. Because my son is 9, the strap is considerably shorter, and it was on taking the guitar off I suffered this catastrophic eye injury. As I was taking it off, I was mindful I was about to hit the ceiling with the end of the guitar. I don't know guitar terminology, the end of it where the strings tie up. I realised I was going to hit the ceiling with it, so I readjusted how I was taking it off, but I didn't realise how close the guitar was to my face. I then pulled it upward and in an instant smacked myself in the eyebrow with the rounded bit of the guitar, which gave me an almost instant eyebrow lump, which has since developed into this beautiful black eye I'm now sporting. If you're expecting some sort of juicy scandal, I apologise. I'm just an idiot. So yeah, now that I feel okay again, I'm planning to do that Fujifilm recipes video next week. So make sure you're subscribed if that's something you're interested in. So yeah, not only did the Fujifilm recipe shots not work, but this is a location that didn't really work at 35mm, as I mentioned before. So most of these shots are taken between 16 and 20mm. And whilst I'm really happy with the images and the conditions were absolutely incredible, I don't know, it's just, maybe it's because I've seen so many images of this place in the past. I feel like these images could belong to anyone. And I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone that likes shooting these kind of images. It's absolutely fine to shoot these kind of images. These are just my very intimate personal thoughts about how I'm now approaching photography. I want to shoot the things I've noticed, and this isn't something I've noticed. This is somewhere I've gone because I've seen it before and there's intention to get the same shot that someone else has got previously. This is no longer what I get photographic joy from. Again, not trying to take that joy away from anyone. If you get joy from this, brilliant. I wish I did, because I remember that feeling of being somewhere like this when the sunset kicked off. But my joy comes from elsewhere. It comes from moments like this when we walk back to the car. This is my favourite shot of the evening. This image of the house and the mood it invokes with the light on, the low-hanging cloud behind, and then there's this little dog sat next to it. It's just an image that just makes me think and is just different and nothing like I imagined I'd be shooting in the Faroe Islands. Just quickly going back to the images with the incredible sunset before, I do really like them, and there's little details like this person stood on top of the cliffs that just give it scale. That is a really nice touch that was completely unexpected from that moment. I didn't ask them to stand there, but they couldn't have stood there at a more perfect moment. I did try a Fujifilm JPEG pano out while I was here, and that's probably not something I'm going to do again. Going back to the house image, most people would walk back to the car after a shoot like this, put the stuff in the boot and drive off. This comes back to what I said before. It's all about the noticing and the being present. It's in those little moments that you can't even expect. You don't know when they're going to happen, which is why it's so important to try and be in that moment as much as possible, to try and be in that zone rather as much as possible, because it's quite easy to think, I've got everything I wanted to get here and go. Yet something like this becomes apparent when you least expect it. The final day was a bit of a walk around Tórshavn, the capital of the Faroe Islands, and I didn't really do much here. I didn't really get an awful lot. Photographing in cities can be quite hard for me because it's quite closed with how close buildings are together. I think I quite like space in my images. I like them to feel more open. I quite like this shot of the staircase going up, and I was intrigued by the graffiti of the fish behind. And just as I was lining it up, this cat walked into shot, which was, to me, perfect because, well, cats like fish. I like this one of the bike leaning against the yellow building as well. I love the colour in it. I love just the bike invoking a sense of someone being there, but without there being a person there, and makes you wonder where they are, what the place is, all sorts of stuff like that. Anyone who's watched the channel for a bit will know that I've got a bit of a penchant for scooters, bikes, mopeds, motorbikes, that kind of thing. So overall, I got a lot of images I really like from the trip, but my favourite ones have all got this commonality between them. And I think that's why I say this trip was a condensing of all the photographic thoughts I've been having over the last 18 months, and about how it's all these moments in between that represent my happy place when it comes to photography. I mentioned that you might be able to apply this to your own photography, and hopefully some of this has resonated with some of you already. It doesn't necessarily go for everyone. But the way I approached photography for a number of years was to try and chase those familiar shots that we see all the time and collect those kind of images. And I think I got all right at doing that, but it wasn't a representation of me, and that's what it should be. This is the change. This is getting in touch with the things I really like and showing them in my photography and working out how to present them in the best possible way. I look at these images as a collective now, and there's something in them that I can't quite explain. It's like there's a feeling of space, something that draws me in, intrigues me, makes me feel something. There's no people in any of these images. Sometimes I shoot images with one person in them, seldom with more than one person in them. Maybe that's representative of something that I'm feeling within. I said before, someone commented on my last video and said that from the images I've shown, they got a feeling of like not belonging, as if I have this feeling of not belonging. And maybe that is representative of how I feel. And honestly, I think I agree with what they said. I spoke earlier about how my images represented how I felt in the past, and about how my images represent this more sort of joyful, more colourful phase that is now more present in my life. But there probably is also this, well, it's quite random shit that feels out of place. And I think that's how I felt maybe for a long time. Not like random shit, but like I feel a bit different, a bit out of place maybe. And sometimes I think I do feel like that, and I'm totally fine with that. And this is just a representation of me embracing that and where I am right now. I think just being comfortable with it, being happy with the randomness of my thoughts and where my brain goes and what it gets excited by. It's a bit all over the place, but it's also nicely arranged as well. Or I don't know, maybe I'm totally overthinking it, but I think there is something in that. I think if you get in touch with the link between what's going on in here and what's going on with this, that's the best way to create expressive photography that is unique to you. And I think that's what we should be trying to do. We should all be trying to use photography as our own little personal voice as to how we see the world. And I think that's where I've finally got to. So despite the fact I've just come back from the Faroe Islands with 20 images that I love and not a single one of them being a traditional landscape, I'm cool with that. In fact, I'm beyond cool with that, and I love these images even more because of that. I hope you've got something from this video. I really enjoy making videos like this, little retrospectives on trips I take, and I'm really grateful to be able to go on them. I'm grateful to Nigel for taking me to the Faroe Islands. So thank you to him, and check out his channel below in the videos we made while we were there. But I'm grateful to all of you as well, watching this and sitting through all my ramblings. I'm not wholly convinced they make sense, but I appreciate the people that watch and take time to comment as well, because the comments are honestly so valuable to me. So yeah, thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.